Okay, Wilbur's been banished. He was digging through my purse. Katrina stood up. It would likely be best to break out of her room on a miniature quest. She would snoop just a bit, go sneaking around. She would sort out the source of this mysterious sound. She pulled up the carpet where no one would look, revealing an almost invisible nook. And there in the dark was a treasury trunk filled with a clutter of jumble and junk. Most people think it was nothing. Most people would think it was nothing but fluff, a collection of doodads and whatchamastuff. To Katrina, however, one thing was true. This stuff came in handy. You just never knew. She dug up a spring from a grandfather clock. It was just the right thingy to jimmy a lock. She twisted the spring and she made it a key. She was rather inventive, I'm sure you can see. Then gripping the spring in her sensitive fist, she opened the latch with a flick of her wrist. Then quietly pacing with caution and care, she crept down the hall to the top of the stair. And down a few steps, like a gossamer ghost, she peered round a lopsided banister post. A man stood below on the entranceway mat, his collar turned up to the brim of his hat. He took off his gloves, his cap, and his coat. He loosened the muffler that covered his throat. His features were drawn and incredibly dark, but his eyes were aglow with a sinister spark. Old Crabby was there. She was wringing her hands like a criminal hatching felonious plans. She quietly spoke to the man in the hall. "Doctor, I'm glad you could answer my call. It's nice you could visit so late in the night. I'm certain your skill will set everything right. You'll cut out the naughtiest bits of her brain so only the parts that are normal remain." "I'll do what I can," the stranger replied. "Your need for a surgeon cannot be denied because, madam, your case is a serious one. So let us discuss it. Just what's to be done?" Above in the stairway, Katrina was still, her fingers and throat in the grip of a chill. The stranger, she sensed, by his timbre and tone, was the sort to send shivers that shook to the bone. Now here's what Katrina so furtively heard as her guardian spoke in a whispering word. "It's my girl. She's upstairs and she's coming unwound. Why, she's quite a few ounces short of a pound. Delusions of grandeur, that's what she's got. She thinks she's so special. She thinks she's so hot. She thinks of herself as courageous and brave. But, doctor, I wish she would simply behave. But her brain is diseased. It's gone on the blink. She's completely insane. She's right on the brink. Why, only today she redoubled my doubt by claiming some creature was skulking about. Some sort of a beastie with thorns on its head and wearing a tie. That's what she said." As he listened, the doctor was thumbing his case, silent and solemn and gazing in space. His brow furrowed up like a fisherman's knot and cried, "We must strike while the iron is hot. Her condition is worse than at first I'd assumed, so we mustn't delay or else she is doomed. It is clear to me now that certainly she's got parapsychotic delusion disease. There is only one method to fix it within, which I'll demonstrate now before I begin." He opened his bag with imperious pride, and Katrina saw horrible things were inside. Needles and skewers that filled her with fright as they glinted and shone in the shadowy light. The doctor reached up in his medical case and took out a tool too gruesome to face. It looked like a drill, but especially made with clappers and claws and a rotary blade. He fondled this thing with the subtlest touch. "I love it," he cried. "Oh, ever so much. It's the finest, most delicate tool of its kind. It's the cranial puncturing mincer of mind. And if you'll excuse some innocuous fun, I'll demonstrate now how the mincing is done." He spun on his heel and he leaped in the air, recalling the cadence of Freddie Astaire. But never as nimble, not nearly as spry, more like a hippo with mud in its eye. He leaped and he danced with his terrible tool. He flourished and spun like a blathering fool. "Madam," he puffed when his dancing was done, "in the surgical world I am second to none. So you've nothing to fear, for I'll snip off her top, I'll flip up her lid, and I'll give her the chop." But old Crabby was bored. She looked up at the clock. She was eager to get to the butchery block. Dr. LaFang, she said with a smile, I don't mean to rush you or hamper your style, but perhaps we should start by moving upstairs. It's best if Katrina is caught unawares. It's not that your banter is dreary or dull, it's just that I'm anxious to crack at her skull. They both looked above at the balcony ledge, but Katrina had already left from the edge. She had scampered away and back to her bed, trembling with panic and dizzy with dread. It would seem she was caught in a bit of a scrape, and the only way out was to stage an escape. So she packed up a sack full of clothing and socks and much of the junk from her treasury box. Then she tied up her sheets in a delicate line like Tarzan would do with a tropical vine. One end she tied to the floor of her bed, while the other she tossed out the window instead. Then she leaped out herself, swung down the sheets, repelling below to the dark of the streets. While up in her bedroom, old Crabby was there, ranting and raving and tearing her hair. She had searched all the rooms from hither to yon, and discovered Katrina was thoroughly gone. She howled with a shriek that was bitter and shrill. It was just as the doctor leaned over the sill. Look, out the window, he said with a scoff. I wonder why all of my patients run off. Mrs. Craybone cried, Don't mess around. We can catch her again if we get to the ground. She wrangled the doctor away by his cuff, and they sped down the stairs in a tumbling huff. But when they arrived at the base of the stair, Katrina was gone by barely a hair. She had fled. She was free. Not a moment too soon, she had scampered away by the light of the moon. Yeah, she'd escaped when the timing was right, but what dangers awaited out there in the night. Meanwhile, old Crabby was red as a beet. She was gnashing her teeth. She was stomping her feet. She clutched at the collar of Dr. LaFang, subjecting the man to a hairy harangue. You listen to me, you incompetent quack. If it wasn't for you and your yakety-yak, I'd have my Katrina now under the knife. She would finally give me some peace in my life. But instead of my peace, as I'm sure you can guess, I get only a lousy, lamentable mess. So listen up good, you botchery buff, you bungler, you dunce, you pandering puff. May it take us a week or a month or a year, we will find my Katrina and bring her back here. Then using that miserable mincer of mine, you'll finish the job that you were assigned. So Mrs. Craybone and the doctor as well began searching the streets for Katrina Cottrell. They scoured the ground, they hunted and hoped, they rummaged and rooted and grabbled and groped. They sniffed with their noses, they narrowed their eyes, they even looked up to the dark of the skies. They listened as well, but heard nothing at all, just the flap of the sheets that hung from the wall.